Good evening, dear friends. It's Glenda, and I am so glad you're here tonight. Please like this video, stay with me until the very end, and leave a comment letting me know which city you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. I never imagined that the person who would try to steal my home from me would be the same little girl I once carried on my back through a rainstorm so her shoes wouldn't get wet. My daughter, my only child. For 34 years, I had lived in the house at 17 Whispering Pines Drive in Hadley, Ohio. Russell and I bought it the spring before our daughter was born, when the maple in the backyard was barely taller than he was. Russell spent every Saturday morning for 2 years finishing the basement. He built the garden beds along the south fence with his own hands. He planted a dogwood tree in the front yard the week Christy started kindergarten. When Russell passed 4 years ago from a heart attack that came without any warning, the house became the place I held him. Every room held something of him. I wasn't ready to leave. I wasn't planning to leave. I was 68 years old, healthy, clear-minded, still volunteering 3 mornings a week at the Hadley Public Library, where I'd worked for 26 years before I retired. I had my routines. I had my neighbor Olive, who'd lived next door for 22 years and came over every Tuesday night for dinner and cards. I had my life, and it was a good one. My daughter Christy is 43. She works as a registered nurse at a hospital 30 minutes north of Hadley. She married Lance 8 years ago, a commercial real estate agent with a firm handshake, a wide smile, and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something just behind whatever he said out loud. I'd always found Lance a little slick, a little too comfortable with percentages and projections, but I told myself that was the nature of his work. I told myself he made my daughter happy. After Russell died, Christy started calling more. She came by on weekends. She brought casseroles. She helped me sort through Russell's closet, which I couldn't have done alone. I was grateful for her then. I held on to that version of my daughter for a long time, even as things slowly began to change. It started in the fall of the year before everything happened. Christy and Lance began visiting more often, twice a week, then 3 times. Lance would walk through the house with his hands in his pockets, glancing at the crown molding, tapping the walls, standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard, with an expression I couldn't quite name. Christy would say things like, "Mom, this place is getting to be a lot for one person, and have you thought about something smaller, something easier to manage?" I told her I managed just fine. I told her this house was my home. She'd nod and change the subject, and I didn't think much of it. Then in January, I slipped on a patch of ice on the back porch steps. I didn't fall hard, caught myself on the railing, but my left knee swelled up that evening, and my doctor sent me for an MRI. A small meniscus tear, minor, the orthopedic surgeon said. A routine outpatient procedure. He'd done hundreds of them. I'd be home the same day, off my feet for a week, back to normal within a month. Christy came with me to every appointment. She took notes. She asked questions. She held my hand in the waiting room and told me she was going to make sure everything was taken care of. The Tuesday before my surgery, she sat down at my kitchen table with a document. "Mom," she said, "with the surgery and the recovery, there might be bills coming in while you're not feeling up to dealing with paperwork. Insurance can be complicated. I just want to make sure nothing falls through the cracks." She slid a folder across the table. "This is a temporary power of attorney, just for financial matters, just while you're recovering. Lance's firm uses a notary we trust. It's completely standard." I looked at the papers. I looked at my daughter's face, open and earnest and familiar. This was my child. This was the little girl I'd bandaged and fed and driven to ballet lessons and sat up with through fevers and heartbreaks. I signed. I didn't read every line the way I should have. I trusted her the way only a mother trusts a daughter, and I signed. The surgery went smoothly. I came home that evening tired but clear-headed, my knee wrapped and elevated. Christy stayed 2 nights. She set up a little station beside the couch. Water, medication, the television remote. She brought me soup. She was attentive and warm, and I thought to myself that I was lucky to have her. She went home on the 3rd day. I settled into recovery. Olive came by every morning. I rested. I watched the birds at the feeder Russell had mounted outside the living room window. 3 weeks after the surgery, on a Thursday afternoon, I pulled myself up from the couch to collect the mail. There was a thin envelope at the bottom of the pile, standard white, with a logo I didn't recognize in the upper left corner. Pinnacle Property Group. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top it read, Relisting Agreement, 17 Whispering Pines Drive, Hadley, Oj. I read it 3 times. The words wouldn't arrange themselves into something I could understand. Listing Agreement. Signed authorization. Market preparation. Showing schedule commencing the following Monday. I sat down on the porch step, the same step where I'd slipped on the ice 2 months before, and I felt something leave my body. Not pain exactly. Something quieter than that. The particular feeling of a world shifting underneath you before you've understood why. I called the number on the letterhead. A woman named Amy answered. I told her my name and said, I was calling about a listing agreement for my property. Oh yes, she said cheerfully. Your daughter came in last Tuesday with the authorization. We've already had the photographer out. Showings start Monday morning at 9. I thanked her. I don't know why I thanked her. I hung up and sat on that porch step for a long time. Then I went inside and called my bank. The account manager I spoke with kept his voice very carefully neutral as he told me that 14 days earlier, a joint account had been opened using the power of attorney on file. $38,000. Everything I had in savings had been transferred into it. The joint account holder was my daughter. I set the phone down on the counter. I stood in my kitchen, in the house Russell and I had bought before Christy was born, and I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My daughter had taken my house. My daughter had taken my money. She had used a piece of paper I'd signed because I trusted her, and she had used it to take everything I had built. There was one more piece of mail on the counter. I'd set it aside without looking at it. A thick envelope from my insurance company, an explanation of benefits for the knee surgery. I opened it now, my hands not quite steady. Patient responsibility, 0 knots. The surgery had been fully covered, every cent of it. There had never been any bills coming in. There had never been any complicated insurance paperwork to manage. The entire reason Christy had given me for needing that power of attorney had never existed. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The light changed through the windows. I heard Olive's car pull into her driveway next door, and I made a decision. I got up, put on my shoes, walked to Olive's front door, and knocked. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I told her everything. She listened without speaking, which is one of the things I have always loved about Olive. When I finished, she set a cup of tea in front of me and said, very quietly, "What do you need?" "I need copies of what I signed," I said, "and I need a lawyer." Olive drove me to Pinnacle Property Group the next morning. I told Amy I had lost my copies in the confusion of recovery and needed duplicates for my own records. She printed them without hesitation. Olive and I sat in her car in the parking lot and read through every page together. The power of attorney was not temporary, it was general and unlimited. It gave Christy authority over every financial and legal decision, with no sunset date, no restrictions. The listing agreement was signed in my name with my daughter's signature as authorized agent. There was also an addendum I didn't remember seeing at all, a document authorizing sale proceeds to be deposited directly into the joint account. Olive knew a woman from her church, a retired paralegal, who knew exactly the right phone number to call. Within an hour, I had Ms. Farrow, a family law attorney who worked with a senior legal aid organization in our county, pro bono for clients over 65. I dialed her number in Olive's car, parked under a bare oak tree, and told Ms. Farrow my story. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Mrs. Glenda, what you're describing is elder financial abuse. The power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses. The fact that the medical bills they cited as justification never existed, that's fraud. I need you to move before Monday morning." Monday was 4 days away. Showing started Monday at 9. Ms. Farrow was specific, methodical, calm, She told me exactly what to file, what evidence to gather, how to move fast. By Friday afternoon, I was at the county courthouse with Olive beside me, submitting a petition to revoke the power of attorney on grounds of undue influence and misrepresentation. We filed a restraining order preventing any transfer or showing of my property. We froze the joint account. I was back home by 4 o'clock. I made dinner. My knee ached from all the walking. I took my medication and sat in Russell's chair by the window and watched the dogwood tree he'd planted when Christy started kindergarten, and I thought, she is not taking this tree. She is not taking this house. I will not go quietly. Christy's call came at 7 Saturday morning. I let it ring. Lance called at 7:15. I let that ring too. By 8 o'clock, Lance's car was in my driveway. He didn't knock gently. He rang the bell 3 times fast, the way people ring when they're already angry before the door opens. I let Olive answer it, and I sat in the living room and waited. Lance pushed past her and came into my living room, and he was not pretending to be concerned. He wasn't trying the gentle approach. Lance had always been more comfortable with numbers than with performance. "Do you have any idea," he said, "what you have just done?" "I think I do," I said. "You froze our account. You put a restraining order on the listing. We had 6 showings scheduled for Monday." His voice was hard and flat. "Do you have any idea what it took to put this together?" "I do," I said. "That's why I stopped it. When were you planning to tell me, Lance? Before or after the sale closed?" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "The plan," he said, in the careful voice of a man who has just remembered he should be careful, "was to get you settled comfortably before we dealt with the paperwork. You'd have had a beautiful place." "My house is worth $425,000, I said. "Where were the proceeds going?" He didn't answer. "Into that joint account," I said, "which you'd have had full access to, because Christy had unlimited power of attorney, which she got by telling me I had medical bills coming in that never came, because my insurance covered everything." I held up the explanation of benefits. Patient responsibility, $0. Lance's face did something complicated. For just a moment he looked caught, smaller than his good suit suggested. Then he recovered. "This is going to cost you more in legal fees than you'll ever recover," he said. "You're 68 years old. You want to spend the next 2 years fighting your own daughter in court?" "Miss Farrow is working pro bono," I said. "I'd like you to leave now." He left. He drove away fast, the way people drive when they're humiliated, and I sat in my chair and shook for a good 10 minutes. Olive sat across from me and didn't say a word, which was exactly right. Christy came Sunday evening, alone. She sat on the couch where she'd sat her whole childhood, and she cried, and she said Lance had pushed this, and she'd known it was wrong, and hadn't stopped him, and she was so sorry. I watched her. I thought about all the times I had believed my daughter simply because she was my daughter, because I had known her whole life, and that felt like proof. I thought about the text Ms. Farrow had already obtained through the discovery process, sent 14 days before my surgery, Christy to Lance. "She'll sign whatever we put in front of her. She trusts me completely." "Christy," I said, "why did you tell me the insurance might not cover the surgery?" She blinked. I was worried. "You called my insurance company 2 weeks before the procedure to confirm coverage. I have the call log." I did. Miss Farrow had found it. "They told you I was fully covered. No deductible. No copay. You knew before you ever brought those papers to my kitchen table." The crying stopped, not gradually, the way grief stops, all at once like a switch. We looked at each other across the living room. "Monday morning," I said, "I'll see you there." She left without another word. The courtroom was wood-paneled and lit with fluorescent tubes that made everyone look tired before they started. Miss Farrow sat beside me, compact and precise and utterly unruffled. Christy and Lance sat at the opposing table with their attorney, a man named Mr. Fenner, who had the practiced ease of someone accustomed to winning difficult cases. Judge Pearson was a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses on a chain and an expression that said she had been in this room a long time and had seen most of what people do to each other for money. Miss Farrow presented our case without embellishment. She laid out what had been signed, what had been transferred, what had been scheduled, and then she introduced the explanation of benefits. Patient responsibility, 00 dons. Covered 100%. Filed 2 weeks after Christy had personally confirmed the coverage by phone. The medical bills were a fiction. The entire justification for the power of attorney had been fabricated. Mr. Fenner called Christy to the stand. She was composed, professional. She said she had genuinely been concerned about her mother's ability to manage financial matters during a stressful medical period. She said she'd believed there might be coverage gaps. She said the listing of the home had been premature, a miscommunication with Lance, and she had intended to discuss everything with me before anything was finalized. Miss Farrow stood for cross-examination. "You called your mother's insurance company on January 14th, she said. You were told her policy covered this outpatient procedure at 100% with no deductible. Is that correct?" Christy's composure shifted, barely. "I may have called." "You did call. We have the call log." Miss Farrow held up the document. "After that call, did you tell your mother there was nothing to worry about financially?" A pause. "You told her," Miss Farrow said quietly, "that insurance could be complicated and things might fall through the cracks. 6 days after being told, in plain terms, that nothing would fall through any crack." She let that sit for a moment. Who would have received the sale proceeds from 17 Whispering Pines Drive? "They would have been used for my mother's care." Into which account specifically? The joint account, which your husband also had access to. Your husband, who had been researching commercial investment properties in Scottsdale, Arizona, 2 weeks before the listing agreement was signed. Ms. Farrow introduced Lance's browser history, property listings, investment projections, vacation rental revenue estimates. None of it resembling care arrangements for an elderly woman. All of it dated before my surgery. Lance, when he took the stand, was less composed than Christy. He was a man accustomed to controlling conversations, and he had lost control of this one early. When Ms. Farrow pressed him on Scottsdale, he said he'd been exploring options for the family's financial future. When she asked whose money would have funded those options, he said the proceeds were always intended for my care. "You texted your wife," Miss Farrow said, holding up a printed page. "By summer we'll have the capital. Tell her we'll find her something nice." Who is her in that message? Lance stared at her. "My mother-in-law." Judge Pearson set down her pen and looked at both of them for a long, unhurried moment. Then she looked at me. "I've heard enough," she said. The power of attorney was revoked. The listing agreement was voided. The joint account was unfrozen and every cent returned to my account alone within 48 hours. The restraining order became permanent. Judge Pearson made a referral to the county district attorney's office. In the parking lot afterward, Olive hugged me so hard my knee hurt and I didn't say a word about it. I pressed criminal charges. I want to be honest about how hard that decision was. This was my daughter. Whatever she had done, I had held her when she was an hour old. I had loved her every day of her life. I had believed in the best version of her long past the point where the evidence warranted it. Pressing charges felt like a kind of death. Miss Farrow sat with me for a long time and let me say all of that. Then she said, "If you don't, the next person they do this to won't have an Olive next door, won't find the mail in time, won't win." I thought about that. I thought about all the women like me. Women who trusted people they loved, who signed things without reading carefully enough, who didn't know the insurance covered everything and the bills were a lie. I thought about how easy it had been, how close I had come. I filed the charges. The district attorney's office took the case. With the call logs, the browser history, the texts, the timeline of every financial transfer, they had what they needed. Lance negotiated a plea arrangement and agreed to testify fully against Christy. He confirmed, under oath, that the planning had begun 14 months before my surgery. That Christy had identified what she called, in her own texts, the opportunity, sitting beside me in the hospital the night Russell died, realizing the house would be mine alone and I would be alone in it. That detail hit me harder than anything else in all of the proceedings, that she had sat beside me in those first hours without Russell, holding my hand in the dark, and had been thinking about the house. Christy lost her nursing license. The Ohio State Board of Nursing revoked it upon conviction. Lance's commercial real estate license was suspended. Their assets, already strained by legal fees, dissolved further when Christy filed for divorce 6 months later. There was very little left. I did not feel what I expected to feel about any of it. I expected grief. I expected some residual pull toward her, the way love pulls even when it shouldn't. What I found instead was a kind of quiet, not numbness. More like the silence after a very long noise finally stops, and you realize how much energy you had been spending just enduring it. I am 69 years old now, a full year out from everything that happened. My knee healed completely. The dogwood tree bloomed this spring with more flowers than I'd ever seen on it. Russell would have been so pleased. Olive and I still have dinner on Tuesday nights, and she still brings pie more often than is strictly necessary. I expanded my library volunteering to 4 mornings a week and started a small workshop for seniors on how to read financial documents before signing them, what questions to ask, what warning signs to watch for. We meet in the library's conference room, 8 to 12 people most sessions, sometimes more. I had my estate documents properly drafted by a certified elder law attorney. My will is witnessed, notarized, and filed. The house on Whispering Pines Drive will go to the Hadley Public Library Foundation. The garden beds Russell built will still be here. The dogwood tree will still be here, just not for the people who tried to take them. The restraining order remains in effect. I have not heard from Christy directly since the day she walked out of my living room and I told her I would see her in court. People ask me sometimes if I miss her. The honest answer is that I miss who I believed she was. I miss the mother I thought I was to her. I do not miss what she actually turned out to be, and I am learning slowly that those are not the same grief. Last Tuesday, Olive brought a peach pie from scratch, and we ate at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed those papers, where everything had begun. We talked about nothing important. The birds at the feeder, a book she was reading, the way the evening light came through the window and made the room look golden and easy, the way it had looked on 10,000 ordinary nights before any of this happened. It looked exactly like that again, just like that. I want to say one more thing before I go tonight, and I want you to hear it clearly. If someone you love is asking you to sign something and rushing you through the signing, stop. If the explanation they've given you doesn't quite add up, stop. If you feel pressure to trust them instead of the document in front of you, that is the moment to read every single line. Call your insurance company yourself. Call a senior legal aid organization. Ask a neighbor. There is no document so urgent that it cannot wait 24 hours for a second set of eyes. You are not being difficult. You are not being suspicious. You are protecting what is yours, and you have every right to do exactly that. I was 68 years old when my daughter tried to erase me from my own life. I am 69 now, and I have never felt more clearly, fully, and completely like myself. Thank you for being here tonight, dear friends. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Subscribe if this story meant something to you. And please remember, you are never too old and never too alone to stand up for what is yours. Good night.